Every day, ships carrying oil, goods, and food pass through one narrow gateway between Africa and the Middle East. But what if that gateway suddenly shuts down? Because if the Bab el-Mandeb Strait closes, it could cut off one of the world's most important trade routes. At the southern tip of the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait stretches just 30 kilometers from coast to coast. On the western side, the arid shores of Djibouti and Eritrea rise from the Horn of Africa. To the east, the rugged mountains of Yemen press close to the water's edge. The passage itself is divided by the rocky island of Perim, splitting the strait into two narrow channels, one barely 3 kilometers wide, the other about 25 kilometers wide. This slender corridor has shaped maritime history for centuries, but its true importance began in 1869. That year, the Suez Canal opened in Egypt, forging a direct sea link between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Suddenly, ships could bypass the long, perilous journey around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. The new canal shortened the route between Europe and Asia by nearly 7,000 kilometers, saving weeks of sailing time and transforming global trade. Bab el-Mandeb became the southern gateway to this shortcut. Any vessel traveling between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean had to pass through this narrow strait before reaching the Suez. Over time, the waterway evolved from a regional crossing point into a vital artery for international commerce. Its geography, constrained, easily monitored, and flanked by unstable coastlines, made it indispensable, but also inherently vulnerable. The physical reality of Bab el-Mandeb, a 30-kilometer bottleneck wedged between two continents, set the stage for the immense flow of goods and energy that now depends on its openness. The strait's role as a global trade conduit is rooted as much in its geography as in the history that made it unavoidable. Each day, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait channels around 4.1 million barrels of oil, close to 6% of global maritime oil trade. Alongside these tankers, container ships make up nearly a third of all vessel calls, moving everything from electronics to clothing between Asia, Europe, and beyond. In total, almost 1.6 billion tons of cargo pass through the strait each year, with containers alone accounting for about 12 million 20-foot equivalent units annually. This steady flow is not just a matter of routine shipping schedules. The composition of vessels, tankers, bulk carriers, container ships, and liquefied natural gas carriers reflects the strait's role as a crossroads for both energy and manufactured goods. Bulk carriers and tankers dominate the tonnage, but the container share underlines how deeply everyday commerce depends on uninterrupted passage. In 2024, that global rhythm was abruptly broken. Houthi missile attacks on commercial shipping triggered a sharp response. Weekly vessel transits plunged by 48%, dropping from a pre-crisis average of 459 to just 252. Insurance costs soared, and shipping companies rerouted or paused operations, leaving the strait's waters far quieter than normal. The sudden collapse in transit numbers was not just a regional disturbance, it was a clear warning about the vulnerability of this maritime artery. For the first time in decades, the world saw what happens when a choke point of this scale is threatened by conflict, and how quickly the effects ripple through the global system. A sudden closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait forces every vessel traveling between Asia and Europe to detour thousands of nautical miles around Africa. The most direct alternative, the route around the Cape of Good Hope, adds close to 9,500 nautical miles to a typical container ship's journey. For operators, that means an extra 13 days at sea for each round trip between Shanghai and Rotterdam. The time lost is not just a scheduling headache. Extended voyages translate directly into higher costs for ship owners and charterers, as vessels burn through 22% more bunker fuel on the longer route. Bulk carriers, tankers, and container ships all face this penalty, regardless of cargo. Even the most efficient, ultra-large container ships designed for the Suez run see their fuel bills surge. For a fleet that relies on tight margins and just-in-time delivery, every extra day at sea multiplies labor, maintenance, and insurance costs. The operational burden lands first on shipping companies and logistics planners, but the ripple effects are felt from port schedules to warehouse inventories across continents. Freight rates react almost instantly to any disruption at Bab el-Mandeb. When the strait closes, spot rates for container shipping can spike by 25 to 40% within days. This surge reflects the scramble for available capacity, as vessels are diverted to longer, less efficient routes. If the closure lasts more than a few weeks, the pressure compounds. A shutdown lasting 1 to 3 months has pushed container rates up by 80 to 120% in past crises. Bulk shipping and tanker markets follow a similar pattern, with the Baltic Dry Index and tanker spot rates climbing sharply as operators factor in extra time, fuel, and risk. Insurance premiums become a second shockwave. War risk coverage, which once cost a few $100s per day, can multiply fivefold as underwriters price in the threat of missile strikes or piracy. For a typical voyage, this adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to operating expenses, even before factoring in the higher cost of fuel and labor for longer journeys. The impact spreads beyond shipping lines. For Europe, a multi-month closure translates into a rise in the consumer price index of 0.6 to 1.1 percentage points, driven by higher costs for energy, food, and manufactured goods. Asian exporters see similar pressure, as finished goods become more expensive to deliver. Each escalation in duration amplifies the economic damage, turning a regional choke point into a global cost point of crisis. Right now, one narrow strait carries nearly 10% of global seaborne trade. Its fragility is a reminder. When a single gateway falters, the ripple reaches everyone. The world remains one closure away. If you enjoy exploring the geography shaping global power, consider subscribing to Strategic Geography so you don't miss future videos. You can also explore the other videos on the channel to discover more strategic locations around the world. And tell us, which strategic location should we explore next?